Hi, this is Anthony Parent of Parent and Parent LLP, IRSMedic, and today I have a special guest. We have Julio, who is from a South American country, and despite the IRS's best efforts to use fear and intimidation to get U.S. expatriates to comply with the law, Julio is not. So, Julio, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I don't want to ask too much personal information about you, but you do own a business in South America somewhere?
I own a business in South America. What we do is we help in a large South American country. And what I do is I help mainly U.S. companies expand into the local market.
All right, that's pretty good. Now, so you're dealing with U.S. companies in a local market. So how long have you been living overseas?
I've been living overseas for almost 20 years.
Okay.
In this country.
Now, do you recall the last time you filed a tax return, if at all?
Well, there's two different versions of that, unfortunately. From my perspective, the last year that I filed was 2006. From the IRS perspective, it was 2002 because one of the things we're required to do as U.S. citizens living abroad is that we're required to send these tax returns by regular snail mail. And many of us in the countries where we live, the mail system is not as dependable as it is in the United States. And especially back then, you didn't even get a tracking number. So your tracking number would just tell you up to the point where it left the country, which is not very useful. So in my particular country, both snail mail going out, regular mail going out and coming in can be very unreliable and can take anywhere from 4 to 8 months to arrive. So from things that I've received from the IRS, I understand that they never received those tax returns. So long answer to short question, it would be 2002.
All right, so you haven't, okay. So now you know about have you been filing, do you have a FBAR filing obligation? And have you been filing those?
I have not. And my original intent was, but there's, and I guess this is a common thing. So when you introduce me and say that despite all the fear mongering, it's not that my position is one of defiance. It's just one of, just complete bewilderment and what to do, because there's so much right now. It's okay. I've got to, because those taxes that I had already previously reported were not done, then I've got to go back to the accountant that I used, and they're going to charge more. And they currently charge me $2,000 a year. So for those 3 years, I've got to go back and have them make some adjustments, which they're going to charge me an additional $1,000 or $1,500. So for 3 years of taxes, just for my compliance, and these are 3 years I don't owe any taxes, I've got somewhere between $3,000 and $3,500 each in compliance fees, which is huge. That's more than many people pay in their taxes alone.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I would say that, and it sounds like you do own a corporation that you control that runs your business, correct?
Well, I've got a company. I wouldn't call us a corporation. We're a small company. We keep things virtual. We got hit by an economic crisis, so we keep things on a tight budget.
Mm.
I think there's a lot, and you find this just in general, not just with taxes, but people say, "Oh, you own a company? Wow, you must be making a lot of money." Well, if you really think about it, 80% of companies, it's a statistic you hear, fail in the first 1 to 5 years. And often, and a lot of the ones that continue, they're not making a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true.
I'm making less than I made when I was an employee, and that's certainly an issue at home. And obviously, the hope is that things are going to take off, and it's going to be big money, and it's going to be great. But up till now, I'm in the case of many others that it's not that much money.
Yeah, and I would say your compliance costs would probably be, you could be, can get really up there when you're using one of the streamlined programs. It is 3 years of compliance you have to do. Now, ultimately, this is really the complaint that I have, is that, our clients will pay us thousands of dollars to get into compliance and to file all the Form 5471s, which sounds like one you would have that is due. Once we apply the foreign tax credit, for no tax due. And it's sort of absurd because, again, most people aren't killing it. It's a very competitive world out there. So you're saying that really you would consider compliance if the cost was reasonable.
Well, I think there's a couple factors to it. There's compliance cost, what you're paying to one of these companies, and then there's the pure amount of time. And many of us, we live in countries that have complex tax codes.
Mm-hmm.
I live in a country that has a tax code that is considerably more complex than it is in the United States. So I struggle just to stay in compliance with that one, and I pay a lot higher tax than I would if I lived in the United States making the same amount of money. So for the years that I did file, it took me anywhere from 80 to 100 hours to chase down. If you're somebody who travels on a frequent basis,
mm-hmm.
then you've got to go through and and if you're somebody who works 80 hours a week, you're not staying on top of these things because you're working hard, and then you've got to go back and look through dozens of pages of your passport. I was in this country, then that country, then this country, then that country. And then you're supposed to fill that in if you're doing it, by the letter, which many of us try to do. It's a huge amount of effort. Why should I live overseas? Was I in the United States? No. Okay. Why should I have to say that I was in Ecuador, then Panama, then Mexico City? I've had weeks where I had part of the day on Sunday, I flew into Argentina for a connecting flight. Then I was in Chile later that day. Then the next day I flew to Peru. And then I was in Colombia. I mean, in a week, I might go through 6 different countries. I'm traveling a lot less now, but at that time, and then I've got, you're at the end of the year and you've got to go through an entire passport to find out what days, just for that. That can take a lot of hours. So getting back to your question, it's a huge amount of effort. The other thing is you have to reconcile the taxes in your country, and the taxes, the country is going to tax based on the way that they want you to invest and the way that they want you to work and other things. And all of that strategy is completely different than it is in the United States. The tax basis is different. In the United States, you've got sales tax, where other countries, so you've got a very small sales tax. You'll notice that the products are much cheaper in the United States, but the United States income tax, you've got that. Well, in other countries, you're going to have, like Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, you're going to have a high value-added tax you're going to be paying. And it's like that in Argentina as well. So you're paying a lot higher in your consumption taxes. So that functions in a way as part of your income tax. You're paying a lot higher in taxes. If I buy a television, I'm paying 3 times what you're paying for a television in the United States. I buy a car, I'm paying 2 or 3 times. I want to buy an iPhone, I'm paying 2 or 3 times. So those are taxes that we pay. And you can say it's a consumption tax, but at the end of the day, my cost of living,
right, it comes out of your pocket, right? Yeah, and you're reminding me of something as you're sort of explaining, that well, you have a strategy, you need a tax strategy for South America, but this strategy is at odds for a tax strategy for the U.S. And so, which world do you belong more to? And I think now you're making the call, belong more to South America. And I think for people who don't quite understand what we're talking about here is that the Federal Income Tax Act of 1913 was passed not really to raise revenue, it was more to provide the way to get proper social behavior. It was the way that by passing the federal income tax, now the U.S. government had a source of revenue other than alcohol excise taxes. So now prohibition, we could get rid of that devil alcohol thanks to the federal income tax, and everything will work out perfectly, except that it didn't. It was a complete disaster. So that is so much of the U.S. that you don't even think about it. I think that your where you live is the tax system. It's just your culture. Like, oh, you do this because it's better on taxes. And now what you're saying is, well, I've been doing all these things because it's better on taxes where I am, but now it could have a negative consequence in the U.S.
Well, exactly, and that's across the board. And that even goes to retirement. So
yes. Oh.
If I live in, I live overseas. Can I have a retirement plan in the United States? No, because I'm not there. I don't live there. So if I get a retirement plan here, I'm double taxed on that. I'm taxed by that in the United States, which is, and it makes you just, and I don't mean that in an angry kind of way. It's just it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, but getting back to just the tax filing, it's a huge amount of effort.
Oh yeah. I would say we would be doubling your effort. If you're spending 80 hours, you'd have another 80 hours to spend. So I hope you like another 2 weeks of your time where you're unable to work on your business. You have to work on taxes. Well, isn't that fun?
Like, I work in a country where they kid about it, but it's a serious thing, that the amount of time that we spend calculating the taxes, it's a very serious tax regime, is very, very high. So it's actually the cost of taxation where I live. It's the amount of effort to calculate the taxes is often higher than the tax you pay, yeah. And because of the complexity. Now, I have to take all that complexity and then translate that into the U.S. system. Now, many companies, many individuals where I live struggle to figure out just our national taxes. Now, I can go, and I've had this happen. I've gone to a number of different, accounting firms that do the tax. They claim to do the taxes both in my local country and also internationally. They claim to specialize. And you can go to 5 of those, and they'll tell you about 12 different ways to do it. And if you spent even a little bit of time, you'll find that half of those are wrong, and a couple of them are completely illegal. And then it's not just a matter of, okay, it's like a commodity thing. Okay, I'm just going to go to like H&R Block and bada bing, bada boom. Okay, we're done. It's fairly complex. So, I mean, I would love to be in compliance. I'm very. There are a lot of people who are giving up their citizenships and things like that, or don't. I'm one of those people. Being for the United States, that means something to me. And a lot of us, we've tried hard to stay in compliance. And one of the problems is with all this shock and awe and fear thing from the IRS, it's pushed a lot of us to be non-compliant. I am non-compliant because of the heavy-handed treatment that the IRS has given me and others. Until I became non-compliant, I was, in my community, the people that I know, one of the most compliant people. And I used to go around telling guys, you've got to be compliant, got to be compliant. Well, in our group now, we're kind of like the jokes because I've had my entire life savings confiscated. And that's something that I'm going to have to look into with lawyers and accountants to see what we can do. But the guys that were completely non-compliant and have done things that are not in agreement with the tax law, they're the ones that have been least punished by this. And people who are starting, they look and see, okay, you I don't know if you can cut my name out on that, but they say, Julio, you've kind of you've taken a beating here, and you're the one who's telling us to do this, and you've taken a beating. Why should we do this? And I don't really have a good argument. And I'm not in compliance anymore because the cost is so high in time and the fees, and I'm not sure that I get in compliance at this ends. That I'm not, that these problems don't continue or get worse.
Well, you are
really see.
You're bringing up something that I notice here too, and it's interesting. You have the same parallel where you go to a tax professional, and you're thinking they're going to give you a good idea, and you said, well, somebody's going to give you a million different ways to do it. Some will be wrong, and some will be outright illegal. That's true in the U.S. as well. That's so true. That so many people, and what we see is that so many people, let's say that Julio says, you know what, I want to get compliant. That's it. I'm going to get compliant. And you start looking on the internet to say, okay, I got to find someone to do this. Okay, how's it going to do it right? the chances of you hiring someone that actually improves your situation are quite remote. And we know because we take over cases all the time where we're scratching our heads saying, what did they do? One of my attorneys just came down right before we started to show me how this one tax professional forced this individual to go through the offshore voluntary disclosure program, the full one, which was the dumbest idea in the world, because now he's looking at a $300,000 penalty where he should have been penalized nothing. And unfortunately, I don't know how much we could do on that. It's just really obnoxious that the compliance industry, there's no real regulation on this because with the IRS says, as well as a taxpayer, you're ultimately responsible, which is sort of a joke because there's no way that somebody could actually understand this. And even people who work at the IRS don't exactly understand it. So that is an absolute valid reason for not wanting to comply. The chances of hitting upon, I mean, there are people out there on the internet who say the dumbest things that are clearly contradicted, and they're out there advertising, and they took on 100 clients because the price was right, and they told them the answer they wanted to hear. And now somebody has to go and clean up this mess. And so that is another, there's no way for you to know. I mean, unless somebody just has unless you do some real extensive research and you happen to have a friend who can kind of look into somebody. For so many people, they're flying blind and they're crossing their fingers, and there is no guaranteed that you'll get the right decision. And then the other thing is people trying to figure out this themselves. So many people have gone to the IRS website, get scared beyond belief, and now they're thinking they're doing the right thing by entering into the full offshore voluntary disclosure program. They're in it, and this is true. I have a client who was yelled at for going into the full offshore voluntary disclosure program. Why'd you do this? This wasn't for you. You should have done the other one. And she's like, you guys did scare the crap out of me. So how about, can you let me out of it? No, we can't let you out of it. You're stuck in it.
I've got a close friend that is in this program now.
Yep.
Because we were talking and I said, look, this is really important, and they went and got compliant, and they've taken a serious beating, and really, and I feel bad because if they hadn't done anything, they'd be fine. But one of the other issues is, let's say that I'm a person who wants to do everything by the book, okay? I can see that my accountant screwed up a couple of my tax returns. Okay, I'm going to switch to another one, and I need to refile those. Now I'm refiling for $2,000 a pop. I've had tax years where my compliance cost, just what I paid on the compliance, and this is because I had to refile or do other things, was over $10,000.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And this is on this, and this isn't on fat cat income. This is
right.
on income that does not, that buys a little bit less than a U.S. middle class existence.
That's right. Yeah, that's we and it's unfortunate when we run into the situations that things require much more time than people expect, and I really can't stand it. I can't stand having to give one of these a $12,000 bill to somebody who is middle class. I understand how much money this is. I understand this. This is not. This is going to take a this is a beating. And this is the thanks you get for being in compliance. But I also think there is a cost you've been paying because you said earlier to say, well, for the people who haven't done anything, we've gotten away scot-free. But that's not true for you at all, because no matter how low the risk of you getting detected, there is a risk, and you have to live. I'm sure. I know. If I was in your situation, I might do the same thing that you're doing. If I was in that same situation, I know I would have a few sleepless nights, where I'd wake up 3 o'clock.
And I don't know if I want to be doing what I'm doing. I'm not a decided, this just happened because I worked in an industry that disappeared over a period of 2 years. And it's kind of like, it's almost like that feeling of like walking down a sand dune and you can't get your footing. I worked in an industry where over a period of 2 years, we ended up traveling all the time, working all the time, more than 80 hours a week. And then suddenly those jobs were gone. And my option, I was lucky in my case, was okay, I'm going to be a consultant. and that I'm going to help some of these other people, some of whom are Americans, who are out of work. I'm going to help them make money as consultants too. And that's what I'm doing. And I work a lot of hours. I don't have time to sit around and think about it or figure out how I'm gonna do taxes in two different countries and reconcile it. I want to. This is important to me. It's a lot of us, we take these things very seriously. We don't encourage people to do things illegally, but it's just I just look at this and I go, I have no idea how to sort this out. The amount of time and money, I just don't have it, because I'm a consultant. I stopped working to do this. It's not like I have a job where I can say, okay, hey boss, I've got this IRS thing. I need to take leave, and it's going to be paid leave. The minute I stop working, I'm not making money, and that I'm not paying rent. I'm not paying a mortgage. I'm not paying for food, and that's the reality. So if we had the Harry Potter magic wand, and we said, what do you need to be compliant? I'd say, if the IRS had it, I understand they had this at one time, for my country of residence, very clear rules about how you reconcile the taxes, and simple rules, because we live overseas. It can't be a situation where I require a highly specialized, very expensive accountant that's charging me $2,000 a year, and it's kind of like a Russian roulette, whether I'm going to have to pay another $2,000 to have somebody else redo them, or the case for people who are paying $500 and absolutely certain that their taxes are going to get messed up. It should be something. I've got friends in the U.S. who make what I make, and they pay less than $400 to have their tax return.
Absolutely.
I should have to pay no more than that.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right, and that's where the offshore accounts and the penalties. And I think this is the thing that gets, and typically that we see the people, I think it's a minority of people overseas who do compliant. The ones that do, sometimes will do just pure principle. They'll just grin and bear it just because they do want to do it. Then the other ones that will do it are those who know they're going to be back to the U.S. There's something the IRS has. There's some U.S. income abroad. So their hands are tied. It is something where they have no choice but to comply because the risks are too much.
Let me just make a comment on that. So there are people who are going to return, and at the time that I left the United States to work overseas, we had our bosses who were 10 to 15 years ahead of us. For them, none of these things happened to them.
Yeah.
And the promise we had, you're going to work overseas, your experience is going to be great, you can return. But something changed during our batch going through. And for many of us who've gone overseas, it's a one-way trip, whether we want it to be or not. And that's what's hard. I mean, a lot of us, the plan was to come back, and now if I come back, I'm just destroyed. I don't know how I can. And the thing is, this isn't because I didn't pay a tax. It's because we didn't fill out papers the right way. We didn't have the funds to do that and the time to do that, all to prove that we don't owe anything, or we owe something just minuscule compared to what the fines are.
Yeah. Oh God. They're completely disproportionate. And the IRS is when they do get somebody, and the IRS, when they assess these penalties on the reporting forms, the 5471s, 8938s, they're just complete jerks about it. The reasonable cause standard is so high to get these waived. They really, with this aggressive campaign of theirs, they really encourage people not to come clean, because this is, the case the recent case that I explained to people what reasonable cause is. We have a client who was a shareholder in a foreign corporation, and that corporation had a 5471 liability. The 5471 wasn't filed. The reason being is that our client was in the hospital. The reason why he was in the hospital is because he was injured, and he became a quadriplegic. And the IRS says, well, you still should have filed. So that's sort of the monstrosity that the IRS has, and it's not really helping people. I think that they think the more they can scare people, the more unreasonable they are, the more they're going to encourage people to do so-called the right thing and comply. When you're talking to your friends who did do it. You're seeing what they're going through. You have your own experience of how much you've paid on just tax returns to show no or little liability due. Why are we why is our tax code doing this? And, I think we just have a system that doesn't care. You kind of left the country there, Julio, I mean, you want to be a good patriot. You live in the U.S., right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
And it's right what you're saying, and it's just a challenge. In the case with these taxes, it's you don't know what to do, and what happens is the demands are so high that finally it's like running on a treadmill that just keeps going faster and faster, and you can't keep up, and finally you fall down.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, I guess I'm going to find out what happens when I fall down because I just can't. I
can't keep up, right? Yeah, you can't. I think that's a fantastic metaphor. That you're on this treadmill working so hard not to be injured, you get injured. Well, what's the point of being on the treadmill then? What's the point of getting on there? And I think that's what Congress really needs to recognize. There are some. Now, I would say this: the IRS did at least get their act straight a little bit with the streamlined disclosure for those who live overseas. There's no penalty associated with it to the IRS. The penalty is to, say, a firm like mine, that your fee can get quite large, even for a middle-class lifestyle if you want to get in compliance. It's just not really something that I wish we could find cheaper ways to do this. But in order to do it right, because the way that we look at it is you're better off doing nothing than submitting something that isn't completely right. Because when you submit that something on the cheap, well, now you're in the system, and now they could detect it simply by looking at it to say, oh, I know this is incorrect because this number doesn't match up. I know I have a $10,000 penalty per year. This is filed at a minimum to start. So if we open an audit, we're already looking at $30,000, and that's just to start. What else am we going to find? So for us, that we are so protective when we do this, we have to review things, and we have 2 attorneys review our submissions to make sure there's something we're not missing. And this delays things again and again. And I think that's one of our biggest complaints from our clients is not just the cost, but sometimes the time involved too, because there's just so much more back and forth than what you're used to domestically. It's just such a different world that $400 return. Absolutely. That's fine for your friends who are, even if they're itemizing deductions, it doesn't take that much time to actually do that. It's not that hard. But boy, you have one, say, foreign retirement. Oh boy. You might have a real hassle on your hands.
And you just get to that point where it's, you look at it and what do you do? And the thing is, as far as I can tell, more than 90% of the people who are Americans living overseas, at least that I know of, don't even know that they have these obligations. And
okay.
Those of us who tried.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that okay. I was sort of getting the feeling that a lot of people now knew, and they just said, I don't think so. But you're still saying, hey, most people don't even know.
Most people that I know. I mean, now. I'd say with some of the FATCA and the more aggressive IRS, it's getting on more people's radar now.
Yeah.
But I remember, I guess it was back in 2008, 2009 when my problems really started getting big, explaining it to some people, and they're like, you don't have to file taxes like you do.
Yeah, right.
People got into really.
Yeah.
Some people got into really heated arguments with me over it. And I said, no, there's no way. I said, hey, and now I feel bad about bringing that up because some of those people have taken a serious beating getting into compliance. And there are other problems that you have if you're in compliance. Now, some of us, we've got businesses, and I've seen this happen, especially with the more compliant people. And I guess it's anecdotal. I may know just the people that have been hit hard, but what's happening to a lot of people is you're an American, you live overseas, your home is overseas, you've got a business in your country of residence. You may have money in your bank account. Now, let's say you're sending money from your country of residence to the United States. Many of us who live in Latin America, the currencies are not stable. So what many people do is they have dollars and have a safe in their house or somewhere. But if you're an American, the obvious thought is, well, I'm an American, so I'm just going to keep money in the bank in the United States. And let's say you're completely in compliance. We've seen this happen to a couple people now where, okay, they're just sending money back and forth between their country of residence, okay? When it's time to, okay, I need some funds, I'm going to take some money out of my savings, all of a sudden the IRS goes and says, you're doing a lot of funny transactions between the United States and Mexico or Colombia or Brazil. Okay, we're going to confiscate everything and boom. And then somebody's entire life savings is been confiscated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's extremely time consuming and expensive to get that back, even if you've done absolutely nothing wrong and the IRS is going to give it back. You lost all the interest on that. You may not get all the money back anyways, and you may be out anywhere between $20,000 to $50,000. And over the years, I've met quite a few people that this has happened to the point where a lot of Americans are just they're figuring this out, and they just like silently cash out, and they bring things down. And I think the more pernicious thing with these taxes, and it's not just what's currently going on, but like with the FATCA and other things, it's increasingly pushing regular, average, middle-class folks to seek out these more exotic offshore protections. And I'm seeing that a lot more now, that like regular folks that would never have thought of having a Bermuda corporation are talking about it. And I think that is going to harm the IRS more than anything else, because suddenly you're going to have a lot more noise at that level. You're just going to have a bunch of regular guys where the amount of effort they have to find the real bad players who have lots of money, you're going to see just a lot of regular middle-class Joes flooding that, because people just don't know what else to do.
Wow.
Operate and do business internationally.
I think you stated it beautifully, that this over-compliance, it's a compliance glut that you can't see actually what's going on, because they're hammering, if you've defined everybody as doing everything wrong as regular people, well, your population that you have to look at is quite large. If you define it down to say, okay, we're looking for these behaviors that probably lead to something that's more significant, maybe something a little bit heavier than tax evasion, maybe somebody who's actually, financing terrorists. Maybe that's, really who we should focus on. Not the tax compliance of somebody who's tax compliant in the country that they're in. So they've flooded. And I think, the perfect example is with the FBAR. The FBAR was originally passed into law just to get those real, really nasty international criminals to make it punitive for them to use the international banking system to finance their nefarious activity. Well, the IRS sort of dusted that off the shelf, right? Because you're like, well, we have these really big penalties. We could just attack regular people with them. So now that scared everyone into filing these FBARs, which are the lowest level. The intel gleaned from FBARs is so low. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, the agency that was originally responsible for filing, said, we don't want to bother with this. This is a waste of our time. Give it to the IRS. The IRS took it over to say, oh yeah, we can punish. We could at least punish people who didn't. Who weren't in 100% tax compliance. And so it's a backdoor way. And that's a real tragedy there, because while our law enforcement, while the IRS is looking at all these regular people, you're missing the true criminals that are hurting people out there. And I think that's another really unfortunate aspect of this entire nightmare. Because I'm talking to you, Julio, and you sound like a really good guy. I got to be honest. You sound like a really good guy.
Well, thanks.
And you would be in compliance if you kind of could be. But it sounds like if you were going to hire, a firm, say like mine, to get you into compliance, I would just say, you're going to be over $10,000 just to get everything done right. I would just want to plan on that. You're like, I don't know how that's going to happen. And by the way, besides that money, I'm going to need sort of like 2 weeks of your time as we go back and forth with all the requests for information and all of this. You're not going to owe anything to the IRS. Hey, as of yet. And now we have this obligation now that you're in the system, you've got to make sure that you file year after year after year. And so I think this is that, we are going to try to get Congress to watch this video. And I hope they are. And I hope they're really paying attention to what they're doing. You're not really getting any revenue here. Guys, if you think there's revenue that you're getting from these expats living overseas, they're paying taxes where they are overseas. You apply that foreign tax credit, the foreign income exclusion, you usually get about this much zero in taxes. Yes, you're there if they have U.S. sourced income, they have tax due, but that's a separate issue. So you're requiring these horrible things to get no revenue. So if you're scoring this for the Congressional Budget Office, letting go of these people isn't going to cost you a thing because you weren't getting anything anyway. What you're doing is you're freeing the resources of the IRS. Instead of going after these people who don't owe anything and just hitting them with penalties that really aren't appropriate, now you might be able to focus at the people who are actually evading taxes. And this is one of the complaints of mine. You know, around here, I know who's evading taxes. It's obvious. I know the exact people who are doing it. Right? Oh, so you're right. You know, it's so obvious, and you never even bothered to.
Everybody knows.
Right? We know, and I know of cases where the IRS has started investigations against people who were evading millions in taxes, and they just dropped it. Well, yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, and because we already got one like that. We already got somebody like that. We already got our press release for that person like that, so we don't need another one. It's like, right, but they're really doing something bad, though. I mean, that's really bad because not only in their tax evasion in there, there's sort of other things going on, too, that aren't so nice. And that's where you're saying, you know, it's been weaponized. The IRS has been weaponized against its constituency, that we end up serving the IRS.
I can tell you what's happening. Because I've worked in sales for many years,
mm-hmm.
and you can see this. There seems to, my take, and again, this is looking at the behavior from the outside of an organization, but I'll bet I'm pretty close on this, is that a lot of these IRS investigators, they work on some kind of a performance plan based on the revenue they bring in and their bonuses that are paid out as a result of that. And what's happening is simple sales behavior. You get what you're incenting. And I guarantee you that it's easier. These guys are going and saying, I can go after some big Hail Mary mega $1 million thing, but it's whoever that is, they're going to have the funds to pay for accountants and lawyers and play a shell game with me forever, and it's going to be a huge amount of effort. Or I've got all this low-hanging fruit. I can just go after a bunch of these little guys and and I can make my number.
There you go.
I guarantee you.
There you go. And I caught a lot of heat for years ago because I was advising sort of the smaller people to say, no, you actually have the risk. And a lot of people said, no, the IRS isn't after the minnows, they're only after the whales. And I said, no, you're nuts. The whales hire attorneys immediately. They already hired them. And they will beat them, and they're not going to go after it because the IRS wants a slam dunk. What their entire goal is to get someone, when the criminal investigation comes, their entire goal is to get someone to plead guilty. 92% of the people do. If they have everyone going to trial, that's not good. They can't take everybody to trial. There's 3,000 indictments a year. They would be stopped if everybody said, wait, hold on a second. I think I want to go to a jury trial. Everything would come into line very quickly. So the large people, I mean, there's a very few large people, and I'll be talking about one in a little bit. This is actually the largest one I could think of that was convicted for tax evasion was Ty Warner of Beanie Babies. I'm going to be talking about this in an upcoming episode. And he had some international affairs, but the reason why he pled guilty, I think, had more to do with that he was really a stand-up guy, and he was actually protecting a lot of people who could have done serious time. I think that he was the one who took it on the chin for the things that other people might have done incorrectly. And I think they did it incorrectly unintentionally, but he was the one left holding the bag. So that's the one case, because he's a gentleman. He tried to get into the Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program when he realized he had a problem. The IRS says, no, we already started an investigation about you, and now they're thinking this, like, when we'll have a great press release. Beanie Babies, everybody knows about those. We'll get this great press release if we can scare the crap out of everybody into getting compliance. And the facts of the case are pretty obnoxious. There's no way Ty Warner in a million years had any incentive to evade taxes. He already made so much money, it was ridiculous. There's no need for him to do that. At a certain level, it doesn't matter. You don't need to do that. It was clearly a mistake of not having the correct paperwork filed, and the IRS launching and teeing off on that. But generally, the IRS is looking for the smaller person who doesn't know, hey, get an attorney to protect you, because the IRS, and so many people believed in that this IRS is about, come clean to the IRS. They're people. They're going to treat you fairly. And that's just crap. They look at you as a target. that's crap. Now you could find an individual here and there.
Damage.
Yeah, now that this is not to say that we haven't run into really great revenue agents or revenue officers who, did some things for us that were favorable. You will find that, but overall, they're trained to look at people as targets for a press release to justify their existence. It's an incredibly sad thing. Now, we are going through trying to get some of these laws changed for expats. So, in conclusion, Julio, what would be the one thing that you would want Congress to do, and what would be the thing that you would Congress did that would say, okay, I'm going to be in compliance?
It's hard to say one thing, but one is, you live overseas. It's got to be. This has to work like it works for the rest of the countries. Otherwise, you put Americans at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah.
You have to have what they're calling residence-based taxation, for example. So I shouldn't even have to file. If I'm living overseas, my income is overseas, I shouldn't have that. Right. I shouldn't have to file anything. And the problem is this: I've got competitors that are from the UK, from Ireland, from France, from Germany, from Italy. None of them have to do this. So what happens is, I'm at a disadvantage of, let's say I'm trying to be compliant. Let's say I get good at this and I can do it in 80 hours a year. That's like 80 hours that I'm not making money that my competitors are. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm still paying taxes that my competitors aren't.
That's a month's of opportunity cost. And as an entrepreneur, that's everything that you're doing is opportunity. That's, and I think that's really. I think the important thing is that the U.S. tax code is making Americans less competitive around the world, and this is still a global economy, and the world is supposed to be our oyster as U.S. persons, but as Julio's saying, that this U.S. tax code really treats us like actually worse than third world citizens. We tax unlike anybody else, and here he's up against it.
I feel like those Russians that are under sanctions. I was reading that article and I said, I know how these guys feel. I was reading this article about these Russians who are under sanctions, that are oligarchs, and they're returning these jets and stuff. And at one level, you're going, yeah, these guys, we have to take the government's word that they're bad guys, and this is a good thing. But then it's like, wait, that's kind of how Americans living abroad are being treated. We're being treated like these people who are harming the state, and this is so harmful because it harms American businesses. Now, you're finding, as an American with a company, and I've read through to an extent that I can understand it, some of the proposed, like this, the tax reform that was passed. As a business, there's no way that I can continue with my business and be tax compliant. But the other thing is, if I wanted to go work for a company overseas, many companies now are not hiring American citizens.
That's right.
I've heard this now. When I left and started my company, there was a company I interviewed with, and they just asked me point blank, "Are you an American citizen? In addition to where you are?" And I said yes. And the conversation ended very quickly after that. And we've heard that repeatedly.
That's a common thing. So we have a tax code that's not. So the current code isn't really raising the revenue, and it's destroying opportunities for Americans. And I think that's what Congress really needs to pay attention to. Julio, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really helpful to see how things are going, and I appreciate you telling us. I hope someday that you can be in compliance, and I hope someday that we have a tax code that says that isn't out to get people. Until then, continue watching IRSMedic. I'm Anthony Pear for IRSMedic. Be sure to subscribe. I will be talking about the Ty Warner tax conviction, a little bit more detail about all those obnoxious things that happened in that case. It's really frightening. So be sure to subscribe. And again, thanks for watching.